I knew when I saw Bill's text message that we would have to take a journey to find out the true meaning of the bus stop. I have to say I was a little surprised by Bill's choice of music in his car. Our first stop was at the bright and luxurious Corner 16, where we would talk to Randy Bedard about what the bus stop means to him.
Talk about a few of the ways that incorporating bus stops in your restaurant has had a positive effect on your guest satisfaction.
Well, I believe when the servers are at their bus stops, they can see a lot of things. As far as one of the main things is seeing if a guest hasn't been greeted, if they've got drinks that are empty or drinks that are half full, they can see other people's sections and help out their teammates by getting drinks for them. They can help bus tables when they're not running food. Get questions answered by the servers. Somebody's looking for a manager or looking for somebody. These people are out there and know what the guest wants. So like everybody's seen when a guest wants to ask a question or a guest is in need of something. The look of them. Looking around or walk up to the hostess stand, and very helpful that way.
How have you had success encouraging servers to utilize the bus stops effectively?
All you have to do is talk about it. The best time is talk about it in rally every day. You just finish up your rally with, hey, make sure that we're at our bus stops today. If we got any questions, and I tell some of the people I work with, my staff, that you don't have to be at one bus stop standing there by yourself. You can have two people at one bus stop, so you can sit there, talk, chit chat, whatever the case may be. Explained it to me when it first came out, but it was. To me, it's a no-brainer. As long as you got your people engaged, they're here to make money, and that's a huge deal of preventing a void or QSA. Our staff, I think, is pretty well trained. They know if a guest has sat there for a while, and they can ask, they can see half-eaten food on the plate, and they can even go up, even if it's not their table, and ask them, is everything okay?
So when we're utilizing it properly, the bus stop really fosters teamwork amongst the staff.
By far.
After talking with Randy, I could see the bus stops were starting to make sense to Bill. Our next stop was Calhoun's Pellissippi to speak to server Jackie Wilson.
Tell me a little bit about how implementing the bus stop has made it easier for you to do your job.
When we implement the bus stop, it's almost like, so it'd be like section 1 and section 2 here. It almost becomes one whole section. So every guest in that area is my guest, as well as with the bus stop partner. And it means that we can cover everybody's needs better. It helps me realize everybody's being taken care of. And my bus stop partner usually helps back me up, and me with him or her as well. It helps us, but ultimately I think it helps the guest just get a better round of service, because they're not missing anything. If you're constantly walking through, eyeing each table as if they're, the whole section is yours each time you come through, they're getting every need met every time one of the bus stop partners comes through.
How often would you say your bus stop partner interacts with the table during the course of a meal?
Well, I mainly work lunches, so quite often. A lot of times I'm on the front porch. I'd say, throughout a shift with my tables, I'd say my bus stop probably at least 5 to 7 times, just, coming through if there needs to be a refill. So, yeah, I'd say at least 5 to 7 during the shift, just coming through.
So ultimately, though, the goal is that we're focusing on the guest needs, and that whenever there's always another person around to try to step in and help fill that gap whenever you're engaged doing something else.
Definitely, yes. I mean, I've noticed, because this is my second term, as Mark had said, and we didn't have this before. I've noticed coming back with it, my tips have improved. The customers notice it. I mean, they really realize that they have more than just one server. I mean, I feel like feels like they're special. Like we're not gonna let anything slide between us. But I've noticed it with my tips and just customer satisfaction the second time around.
All right. That's the goal. How do they get brought into this culture of the bus stop, and they're able to function, hold their own as
Right.
a team member on that?
Now, of course, in training, we go through it in training as well, but it does take extra training with them, just to encourage them to each time they come in to eye all the tables and not just their section. And it is a process. It's not something straight out of training, but they do. I believe that once they see how smoothly the shift goes with it, I mean, they buy in, and that's basically once they buy in, it's done. But it is a little bit of a process out of training, just to teach them to eye the whole bus stop area instead of just your.
I was confident that Jackie had done a sufficient job in explaining the bus stops to Bill. However, our journey continued to Chesapeake's, where we talked to Russ Green and Leslie Zabrowski.
Russ, we're visiting several restaurants, and we're kind of talking to people about bus stops today. So what does the concept of bus stops look like in your restaurant?
We have several areas that we keep, make sure that everybody's in that spot. We try to make sure that teamwork is spread throughout them, not just conversation, not being on their phone, but actually studying how the things are flowing without the dining room and making sure that they can help to make changes as far as if someone's not greeted at table or if someone looks like they're a little busy, that they can help out and they're in the right position. So basically they are looking for their area that they're responsible for, and we have several areas around the dining room that we basically have them get together, and it gives us a better flow. As far as them talking to each other, figuring out what people are ordering, and it kind of, with our specials, as many specials that we have, it makes nice conversation, so they're kind of questioning each other. It's like, what's on that fish again, or what kind of drinks are we doing for our special tonight? And they get little contests going that we can make sure that they are at least trying to strive to be better servers.
So the idea is that you have more eyes on the dining room. People are available to the guests, actually being out in the dining room, available to the guests.
Yes, that helps a lot.
So how do you feel like this has impacted service in your restaurant?
I feel like they're in a little bit more of a competition. I mean, if you see someone and they're helping out, they want to help out. So it's kind of getting everybody to kind of step up their game a little bit.
Yeah, are there any keys to helping this work properly?
Well, we go through rallies, and every day we try to make sure that they understand what the point is as far as the bus stop. It's not a social event. It's something to help us work as a group to make sure that our guests are getting the best service possible.
So I hear it kind of takes consistent reinforcement to get this in place. It's always a work in progress.
You have to do it every day because with what's going on as far as you don't get the same people in the rallies every day. We have some people that are working just lunches. So if we don't hit it every rally, it just kind of goes in one area.
How do you feel like this ultimately, how does it impact the guest?
I think they're much more satisfied. They can see that people are around them at all times, which kind of helps. You don't see people really staring around trying to look for someone to help them. They know that if they kind of need something, if they look up or something, someone's got their eye on them, or a manager has an eye on them and says, hey, what can we do for you?
As you get really busy, I imagine the process breaks down somewhat. How do you regroup and get it back on track?
First way is to make sure that they're still focused on their own tables. And I think if we can do that, then the other people, because everything comes in flows. One server's going to be really busy and another server doesn't really have anything to do. But as long as we put our bus stops there and they are aware of whether if they're not doing something, they know they need to run food, run drinks, go to the raw bar. There are so many other things that they can do to keep the flow of the restaurant going.
How do you bring new team members into this process, make them understand what bus stops are all about, and kind of?
Well, once they're in training, that is part of their training. They are working with whoever's training them, and they're another body at that bus stop. So that's part of their training. It's not something that we just kind of let them kind of figure out. We do it in a rally. We hit up where they're supposed to be. If they're in this section, you're supposed to be in this bus stop. And that's something that's reiterated through the trainer.
Tell me a little bit about how you've implemented bus stops in your restaurant and how that's affected the culture.
So we talk about bus stops in almost every rally. We definitely go over it every week.
So communication's really key.
Yeah, just making sure that we're consistent, reiterating how important it is, why it's important to them. All the servers know that they're able to anticipate their guests' needs easier and more effectively if they can actually be visible and have their guests be visible to them.
What are some of the obstacles to being effective at this?
I think sometimes in the slower business hours, they get really comfortable being in the kitchen, or in our restaurant specifically, we have a little area behind the bar where they kind of feel they can communicate and get lost, but we just have to stay on top of them. And
So you keep redirecting them
Yeah.
out to the areas that
Absolutely.
you want them to be to keep that focus on
Yeah.
the guest. What do you think? How has it affected your business? Has it made a measurable impact on the guest experience?
I think it's dramatically decreased our guest complaints because they're getting so much more or a better care. I think that the servers are more aware of what's going on, and they've actually gotten a lot better at teamwork because they're helping each other with each other's tables. They're not just solely worried about their own guests.
What kind of reaction do you get from the servers on this when it's going well?
I think that they notice an increase in their money. Honestly, I think that when they're seeing that they're taking better care of their guests and the guests are happy, they're seeing an increase in their pay, which is the most motivation I think for them. I think they do really great with that.
Anything else that you want to add about it?
Just that I think it's been really well for the company as a whole, working at two of the different concepts. I've seen it put into place when we first started it and seeing how it's gone throughout the time that we've implemented it. And it's been up to me.
After speaking with Leslie, she offered to show Bill where the bus stops were in her restaurant.
Because you can see this half of the lounge. You can also see the glass room, which we utilize a lot. So we have our next bus stop, which is here in front of our lobster tank. This is another great location for one because it's a little bit more of an open space. You can see the whole lounge from here. And if you're a lounge server or a dining room server, you can also see our guests that are on this side. And that just encourages some more teamwork by helping see what's needed by our guests. This one here, which is our most popular bus stop because you can see a little bit of the entire restaurant. You can see our wait area in the front with our host stand. We've got the bar if you need help running drinks. This one is definitely most of the go-to for our servers. A lot of times we'll utilize this as a silverware rolling area, but as one of our bus stops, it just opens up this entire dining room area for our main dining. You can really see everything from here, so you get a lot of teamwork coming off of this bus stop.
As we left Chesapeake's, I knew Bill was finally making sense of the bus stops, and I wouldn't have to worry about him sitting out in the cold anymore. However, he started driving really fast, which immediately told me that his blood sugar was getting low and we better hurry. Thankfully, our last stop was Copper Cellar downtown to speak to Abby Sly.
Abby, why don't you tell me a little bit about what bus stops means to you and how it kind of plays out in your restaurants?
Oh, yeah. So bus stops are a wonderful tool that we get to use both front of the house and then back into the back of the house. What you have is you've got your spaces within the restaurant that you've already designated. It always has to do with pre-planning here. You've designated spots where groups of your servers can congregate, in a sense, without being a nuisance to the dining room, as in disrupting the guest experience. So that's where we're going to start with. Those are the spaces that you're using. So a lot of times you have to find spaces that are not going to be so out of the way that they're blocking maybe a path to the bathroom or perhaps to your patio, or blocking the entrance, so they're out of walkways, but they're still in areas of the restaurant that the experience of the guest can be viewed, because that's what you're using the bus stop for, is to view your guest experience. This way we can eliminate any type of misgreets, because if the guests are all being viewed, then we can see them at their tables. We can make sure that everybody's being taken care of. You're going to be in the pathway of being able to see flow of the restaurant, so you can see if any other servers need help outside of your little realm. You are also going to be able to be a smiling face that's in view of the guest as well, so that you look ready and able to help
The big
them.
key is
Yeah.
servers being available to the guests
Absolutely.
and actually observing and seeing what's going on in order to anticipate their needs.
Sure.
Make sure we have somebody to take care of the guest.
Well, we have those places in the restaurants already that the servers always end up in, where it's a silverware rolling table or perhaps something right by the kitchen door. But those spaces tend to become what I like to call talking about what you saw on Snapchat last night spaces, instead of actually being of service to the restaurant.
You know, I use that a lot. Snapchat,
Do you?
it's something big for me.
Oh, you gotta add me. We'll do that.
This is not true. Bill knows less about Snapchat than he does about football or LeBron James.
Out of those spaces, so they are more visible to the guest, so that they look available. Also, it kind of eliminates that kind of gossip corner, because if they're in complete view of the guest or earshot of the guest, you're not going to be able to talk about that kind of thing with your guest having to listen in on it. So it eliminates that kind of unnecessaries that we need during a shift.
So what are some obstacles that you come across that have made it difficult to implement bus stops?
Sure.
How to overcome that?
One, an uncomfort level. I think getting people to feel like it is okay to kind of be on display to the guest versus, no, I just want to hide. I want to be over here in this
Are there
corner.
some ways that you've coached that you've had success with?
Sure. It's all with experience. So if you see something that actually happens that's positive based on using these bus stops, you have to highlight it so that everybody understands that this is why we're doing it, okay? So, case in point, one time we completely noticed that a guest had spilled their drink, and because somebody was in the bus stop directly in front of their table, and they were able to rush over, clear up the mess, and alleviate any uncomfortableness of the guest experience at that point. I immediately took that situation back in front of everybody, wrote a high five to that person for being in their bus stop, so that they could take care of that guest situation. If people start to understand, oh, that's why we're doing this.
So it's that connection with guests, taking care of the guest needs at
Exactly.
any time, and making sure we've got better coverage on that as far as
In that
goes.
particular situation, that that server that wasn't their table, but that server was actually tipped by the table.
Oh, wow.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I
that's
know
a-
it was
that's a
like
great
$5,
outcome.
but because they were available to help. So I think that's the big thing, showing why we do it, to alleviate that comfort level. But also sometimes you just have to jump in there and kind of move things along as a manager.
Yeah, talk about that for a minute. What does that look like?
Sure, I think there's always going to be a bus stop in your restaurant that gets used more than the other bus stops. Still dealing with that comfort level. And so a lot of times you just have to walk up to the group of servers or bartenders and say, hey, I think too many people are waiting for this bus at this stop. We got to go on up the street and move it along. And we've used this statement before, like, well, how many times do you have to do that? As many times as it takes. But I think if you take that kind of positive turn on it and make it a little bit of a joke, like the move along to the next
So
bus
it's
stop.
always going to take some manager. It's always going to take some manager involvement.
Oh,
And so
absolutely.
bus stops are not going to just happen because
No.
we've talked about it and we want to.
No.
You have to get hands on a little bit with it.
As with anything that we use, any type of tool that we use within our restaurants, we still have to supervise and coach and guide. But that's our job.
Why don't you you got any more best practices that you think helps get the bus stops rolling?
Yeah, I think especially with starting this and implementing it into a restaurant as a brand new concept, the big thing is pre-planning.
Because it's
And
really a culture piece, right?
It is, absolutely. We've got to habitize, and the way to do that is really simple in that actually drawing the bus stop on your section map. Let it be known that if you were looking at a map of all the different tables, you would also see where the bus stop is. You got to let them know where to go, right? It's kind of like a map that you'd find on a city planning where the trolley stops. It's the same concept. So showing them where it is, hey, even in a rally, moving them around to the different bus stops and highlight the things from this particular bus stop that you can accomplish while you're standing there. So if this one is closer to this part of the bar, now you can be running some well drinks if you're over in this bus stop. If this bus stop's closer to the front, why don't you keep an eye on the host staff over here and see if you can help them seat anybody. Give them actual directions as to what the bus stops can be useful for to play. But like I said, the big thing here is planning and making sure everybody's on the same page first as to what you expect and where they should be.
So what kind of outcomes for as far as guest satisfaction have you seen?
Well, one thing comes to mind, and it's this simple. What I used to always say when somebody was waiting on their food, and maybe the ticket was taking a little bit longer in the kitchen, and the server's in the back behind you on Expo going like, how much longer, how much longer? And one of my biggest directives was always, I'm telling you, I'll get the food out. The big thing is for the guests to see you in front of them or around them, so they know that the reason your food's taking longer has nothing to do with you. Because if they don't see you, they're going to automatically assume the worst, right? Oh, they're out smoking. Oh, they're in the bathroom. They're not paying attention to me. So take that concept, spread it into the bus stop. If all of these guests can see servers, bartenders, host staff even, waiting in these specific areas, like being attentive and available, how can you mistake that for any type of lack of service?
Yeah, I think that whole key, attentive and available, is a big piece of this. I think one of the things that I always saw it was in some of the better restaurants in big cities that I went to. The servers would always post themselves up in the dining room, and that's the key, is trying to bring all of that in.
And doesn't it elevate the idea of the experience and what type of restaurant we're providing? It's less casual at that point. If you're on alert and in front of people, it creates a whole different experience for the guest of this is a nicer restaurant. They're ready to take care of me. We're not an inconvenience to them. They're available. And I think that's what we can do that's unlike anybody else in this town.
While our journey has ended, our relationship with the bus stops has just begun. Our journey has taken us far and wide to find out what a bus stop really is and what it is not. No longer will Bill sit out alone and in the cold waiting for an answer. For now he understands that a bus stop cannot be found on a city map or in a crowded downtown street, but inside the restaurants and ultimately inside our hearts. When used effectively, bus stops can increase your customer satisfaction, reduce complaints, and ultimately help ensure that every guest of the Copper Cellar leaves happy and satisfied.
Damn it, Bill, slow down! Slow down!
Let's, all right, stop that. How do you keep them focused on the guest satisfaction?
They would already want to be focused on that.
Cut.